Boxing Truth here. Now for the main event for tomorrow night, the fight everyone's looking forward to, the super middleweight semifinal in the World Boxing Super Series between George Groves versus Chris Eubank Jr. It's a fight I'm looking forward to as well. We're going to find out, as Jr. just recently stated, who's the real and who's the fake, whose confidence is real here, who is really the more improved fighter between the two after setbacks both fighters have received in their careers. We're going to see if who's really the more improved fighter of the two, and has George Groves really improved since his controversial first loss to Froch. This is going to be a film study and also a prediction. I don't have much time, so I'm going to get right to it. Well, I'm going to start with George Groves. We're going to look at his first fight with Froch, just maybe the first round, to see how Groves, before the fight, truly mentally rattled Froch. I mean, it was fun watching Groves just get under the skin of Froch. And Froch, he came into the fight very pissed off, very emotional, and he fought with his emotion in this fight. It got him off his game plan, and he was pretty much trash in this fight for the first 7 rounds until he finally landed a home run right hand that buckled Groves and was able to turn in the controversial stoppage. So now you see in the first round, Groves, he's a tricky fighter. He likes to get in and out of punching range, likes to set up his right hand with his jab. He has an effective jab, good power in his right hand. He's a good body puncher, uses a lot of upper body movement, feints, and he's a pretty good counter puncher. Groves is before this fight was very confident, was the young brash challenger who talked a lot of trash, played a lot of mind games, liked to play the psychological warfare, and it almost worked with Froch. I mean, he was really putting a whooping on Froch from the beginning of this fight, was landing some numerous shots, big shots, counters. It's amazing how Froch was able to stand up to some of the shots he was taking, which could translate into Groves not being as big a puncher as people like to perceive him to be. I'm not to say that Groves is not a big puncher. He has good, decent power for a super middleweight. It's good power, but it's not concussive knockout, one-punch knockout power, even though he knocked out Jamie Cox with a body shot in his last fight. But he can punch a little bit. He just doesn't have concussive power. Not devastating one-punch knockout power, but he's a tricky guy to fight when he plays it smart, if he uses his distance, if he likes to fight on the back foot and set up his right hand counters. He could really give Eubank some problems when it comes to that aspect of the fight. And if Groves is smart, he should fight on the back foot, let Eubank come to him since he's a smaller man naturally in this fight, and try to set up his right hand counters. That's when he's at his best. That's really his best punch. He's got a decent left hook as well, and he also has a good body work with both hands. But his right hand is his bread and butter. He's got good speed, and he counters Froch here. With the step back counter, lands a nice left hook right hand that buckled Froch, and Froch is pretty much in trouble. He's out on his feet. Luckily for him, it was at the end of the round, and for the next 6 rounds, Froch was in trouble, was on the verge of being defeated by this young brash challenger that he had no respect for. He had no respect for him. His defense was trash throughout this whole fight. If it wasn't for that home run right hand, he probably would have lost his belt that night. But luckily for him, the referee got him off the hook, and he was able to turn things around in a rematch. Hired a psychological sports therapist to deal with the mind games of Groves, and he was much better prepared and more respectful of Groves in the rematch, and he was able to end their rivalry in a devastating fashion, in clear-cut fashion, by knocking him the fuck out in their rematch at Wembley Stadium about almost 4 years ago. So we're going to look at Groves' last fight to see if he's really all that much better improved, much better if he's really, you know, a better version of himself. So let's look at his last fight against Jamie Cox. We're gonna see here. This was a major cherry pick. This was smart of Groves. He was the #1 seed. He took it at full advantage. I mean, he cherry picked this former super welterweight, not even a full-fledged super middleweight, not a true super middleweight. He took the chance, you know, for the money. And he was out of his depth, Jamie Cox. He did not belong in this tournament. He was fighting a much bigger man who was much more experienced, and Cox hadn't fought anybody. He's got a decent punch, but you need more than power at this level, and you need a lot more experience. And Groves, he took full advantage, was able to make Jamie Cox take the bait with his feints, and Cox would attack with his left hand. He would constantly get countered with the right. Groves throughout this fight will land some really good body shots. Now, has Groves improved as a fighter? I really can't say that he has. All I can say, maybe slightly. He's older now. He's bigger. I would say he's stronger. He's much more filled out, a super middleweight. He's been at the weight division for a long time. I would say he's stronger. His speed, I don't think he's as fast as he used to be when he was in the first Froch fight, but he still has good hand speed. So that's something Eubank Jr. can't underestimate. He's got, you know, decent hand speed, above average hand speed. He could be quick in there and fast with his counters. So that's something Eubank Jr. needs to watch out for when he goes on the attack mode. He needs to watch out for those right-hand counters, those step-back counters. And Groves, when he's focused, he can really be tricky with his defense. He can dip and dodge and take advantage of your mistakes, which is what he wants to counter you with his right hand, which is his best punch in his arsenal. And this was a showcase fight. You know, took full advantage of this inexperienced guy who had no business in this tournament. No experience at super middleweight, and it was a good fight for Groves, a nice confidence booster after his for his first defense of his WBA strap. This is his first title defense. Just won the title off, shouldn't have. And a lot of people are picking Groves based on the fact that he's much more experienced, and he's been in there with better opposition, and he's tested himself at the top level. You can see here he got caught with a left hand here. As you can see, Groves is still vulnerable. Even though his confidence is back, he's got his mojo back, he can still be teed off on the ropes. He can still land big shots on him because Groves just loses focus, has defensive lapses, and you can buckle him. He can be hit, he can be hurt. Doesn't have the sturdiest of chins. He got rocked a little bit by a middleweight, a former super welterweight in Jamie Cox, but he does have a good punch. That's the one thing he does have. But Groves was able to get out of trouble, was able to recover. And the thing is, even though Groves has more experience, has fought way better opposition compared to Eubank Jr., the thing is, he hasn't beaten those guys. Every time he stepped up to that top level, he's been beat, and he's been beaten convincingly. It wasn't close. He had the good performance against Froch in the first fight. He was winning that fight. It had more to do with, you know, Froch being up there in age and also fighting with a lot of emotion. He was trying to take Groves' head off. He was trying to annihilate him. Wasn't really focused on the game plan. And he was able to, Groves was able to take advantage. But in the second fight, it was much more competitive, and Froch was able to separate himself until he knocked him out in the 8th round. So even though Groves is more battle tested, has fought better opposition, he hasn't beaten none of those top guys. He lost to every top fighter he ever fought. Got stopped twice by Carl Froch. One of them, granted, was controversially. The second one was clear-cut KO finish. The second fight, was against Badu Jack, and he was definitively defeated in that fight. It was competitive early, but then Jack separated himself, knocked him down, put a whooping on him. It wasn't that close. It was not a very competitive fight. It was another setback for Groves. So when you look at it, has Groves really improved, or is he a certain level of fighter? To me, he's a B-level fighter. He's a guy that, this is a quote that Senior said recently during the build-up to the fight on Fight Week. He said Groves is good, but he's not great, and that's a 100% true statement. Because Groves hasn't proven that he's great, because he's lost to every B-plus fighter he's ever fought, in Badu Jack, in Carl Froch. So how good is George Groves? To me, he's a B-level fighter that can't beat the elite of the elite competition. And what's George Groves' best win? I mean, really, James DeGale is a bomb, and he had a close decision against him, majority decision. He beat an old Glenn Johnson. He has a win over, I would say his best win is against Shouldn't, because he was a proper champion. He was the legitimate WBA champion going into that fight, even though it was for a vacant strap. But Shouldn't was robbed against Sturm in Germany. But the fucked up thing that happened to Shouldn't was that after he got robbed, he was in limbo. He had to sit out for about 15 months, and while he was sitting on the shelf and not being active and collecting dust, Groves was very active. He scored. He had 4 fights in 2016. He was able to rehabilitate himself, got some confidence boosters in, wins over Martin Murray and you know, some showcase fights, and then he went into the fight against Shouldn't, you know, ready, sharp, active, and he was ready to go. And he was able to, he showed a good work rate in that fight. He outpunched him, he outworked him, and he was really getting to Shouldn't, and he was starting to, you know, buckle him with some shots, which just wouldn't stop punching. And the stoppage was a little premature, but Groves looked like he was appearing on the way to, you know, perhaps stopping him. And Groves is not a concussive puncher, so maybe it's best that the referee did stop the fight, because maybe it could have been another situation where one of the opponents Groves fought in 2016 ended up, unfortunately, not the same after that fight. Not in terms of, he doesn't have all his faculties together. So that's the other aspect of this fight, and that's what Senior has brought up to the attention of the boxing world, and also to the referee who's going to be officiating this fight. So now let's look at Chris Eubank Jr. and see if he's really improved since his setback against Billy Joe Saunders, which was about almost 4 years ago. And this is at British level. Saunders was not in the best of shape, but he's a tricky fighter, very difficult style. And you see Eubank, he's lost because Saunders he's a tricky guy, man. A lot of upper body rhythm, slippery in there, slick, not hard, not easy to hit. And you see Eubank, he's trying to tee off on him, but he can't because Saunders is not there. He doesn't let him, and all these feints and all this movement is fucking up Eubank's flow. So, and another thing, he doesn't have a jab. His jab is not developed. It's a shitty jab. It's not effective. It's not authoritative. It's not a strong, effective jab that he could take advantage and you know, to step in and set up big shots against Saunders. It wasn't until the second half of the fight where Saunders started to slow down, his gas tank was on empty, that Eubank was finally able to cut the distance and land his big shots, but he just wasn't smart in this fight. You know, the footwork wasn't there. He wasn't trying to set up any shots with his jab, was just trying to land big shots. But you can do that against stationary targets and heavy bags, but you can't do that against a counter, slickster, and tricky fighter like Billy Joe Saunders. So this is a good learning experience. Eubank is relatively, was a novice here. Didn't go 12 rounds, not even once. In there with a much more experienced fighter in terms of amateur pedigree, and he was just a lot more experienced. So, but Eubank, he gave a good account of himself in the second half of the fight. I mean, he was getting outboxed and outpunched in the first half, and it was a bad performance those first 5 rounds. I mean, he just couldn't do much besides just steamroll him and try to land big shots. So you see Saunders is he's taking his time. He's able to land his jab, get Eubank off his game. Keeps popping him with the jab. Eubank he doesn't jab to get in. He's just trying to land those big shots with those hooks and uppercuts. He throws all those shots very well. The power shots, the uppercuts, the right hooks, the left hooks, but his jab here was just, he neglected it, and it just wasn't developed at this time. He didn't have a jab, and if you don't have a jab, you can't beat Billy Joe Saunders. You need a jab to beat this guy. And it wasn't until Saunders slowed down that he was able to have success. He lost the first 5 rounds of this fight. It was a bad performance, and you can see Junior's lost. He's like, fuck, man, this guy's style is tricky. So that was a bad round. So it was a good learning experience, though. He learned from this fight. He learned that he's got to work on his game, that he's got to work on certain things, and also he hasn't fought this type of opponent since. But there's not many slicksters out there like Billy Joe Saunders, to be fair. So now let's look at his most recent fight against Yildirim, and you'll see a major difference in his performance. You'll see a major difference in his quality and what he's been working on. He looks stronger now. He's older. He's more mature. He's always had a good gas tank, but now he's been working really hard. The loss really lit a fire under him. But unfortunately, he's been matched with a certain opponent, a certain style. His father has kept him away from the movers, the slicksters. And Avni, he's an undefeated guy, big, strong, was well-rated contender by WBC. It wasn't, like a cherry pick. It wasn't like, Avni was some bum, but he was inexperienced. But he was a confident guy, undefeated, but just didn't have the style to beat Eubank Jr. and didn't have the boxing skills. And you see, Jr., his jabs has improved. He's using it now. It's not authoritative yet. It's not a devastating jab, but it's effective. He uses it to score points. So you can see Eubank has improved, despite fighting the similar styles that he's been fighting. He's working on his defense. He's working on different things. He's trying to be more defensively responsible. He can be reckless. He can be you can't lose focus and get hit, because he doesn't have, sometimes he just doesn't have respect for his opponents, and he could be over reckless and throw too many punches in combination. He can get caught. But you see here, he's working on his jab. He's actually throwing the jab. In the Saunders fight, he didn't throw it at all. Barely any jabs. He was just trying to tee off on him. But now you see Eubank has been working on a lot of things. His jab, his movement, his combinations, trying to set up shots with his jab, setting up counters. And you see, he's just too fast and too good for Avni. Avni just doesn't have the head movement, doesn't have the fluidity, doesn't have the arsenal to compete with Junior. He might be bigger and stronger, but he's a true super middleweight, but Eubank is just more talented in every aspect of the game. Better footwork, better athlete, more skill, has a more effective jab, better counter puncher, and just more arsenal in his game. Nice uppercut that landed, and that was all she wrote. That was the end of the fight right there. Avni never recovered, and Eubank was expected to win this fight, but the way he dispatched of this dude was, I mean, Abney's he's not a world beater, but you know he was a younger version of Abraham, just not as experienced. But he was a little more active, I'd say, with his punches in the fights that I've seen of him compared to Abraham. I mean, there were tailor-made styles for Eubank, but he was a younger version, not as experienced, but he was, I would say, more willing to let his hands go than compared to Abraham. But this was a good performance. It's shown that, you know, Eubank has improved, that he's working on other facets of his game, not just working on landing good combinations and trying to treat opponents like heavy bags. So that was a good round for Eubank, and he was able to get the knockout in this fight and make a definitive statement in the super middleweight division. Not the most elite guy out there in Abney, not even close to it, but it was a good performance, and he did better than I think people anticipated. I don't think anybody anticipated him knocking Abney out in what, 2-3 rounds, because the guy was undefeated and he's shown to be, you know, pretty sturdy in there and in previous fights. And you know, some fighters in the super middleweight division were saying that Abney could be, you know, a tough fight for Eubank. So this was, in my view, a better than expected performance. So Eubank is full of confidence. You know, now the roles have been reversed when it comes to this fight, and Sutherland was actually talking about it at the press conference, and it's true. I mean, now it's Eubank that's the young, brash challenger that's, you know, playing mind games and trying to get in under his opponent's skin. And to a degree, he's gotten under George Groves' skin. And you can see at the weigh-in that it's definitely evident that Groves is not, he's definitely uncomfortable. Doesn't like being in the presence of Junior. He's definitely a little irritated by Junior's presence and his trash talk. And you can see that Groves he's matured, he's grown up. He's no longer that young, brash challenger. He's a man now who's world champion. He's got his mojo back. He's confident. But Junior has definitely gotten under his skin, and I believe Groves is going to be coming into the ring with emotion. He's going to be fighting with his emotion, similar to how Froch fought with emotion against him. It's kind of like a complete turnaround, full circle. And you can see Groves is trying to intimidate Eubank, but it didn't work. He's trying to, you know, mean mug him really hard, but it didn't work. But you can definitely see that Groves was a little bit uncomfortable. Whether it means much in the fight, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see tomorrow. We'll see how the styles mesh. I could see if Groves is smart, he'll fight on the back foot, make Junior come to him, land some counters, try to land a big right hand, try to hurt Junior. But Junior's got a good chin. He's been caught in the past against decent punchers, not devastating punchers. He's never fought no huge puncher, one punch knockout guy, but he's fought some decent punchers like Spike O'Sullivan. He's been caught clean, and he's been able to recover and able to get back in there and fight. So Junior's got a good chin. He's got good eyes. He can be reckless, but he's the more explosive guy here. He's the faster guy. He's the guy who's sharper, that has the more judge-friendly punches. Groves is I would say a little stronger. I would say he's a bigger puncher. He's the more experienced guy, but he's a certain level of fighter who hasn't yet defeated an elite level fighter, and I don't think he's capable of beating a B-plus level fighter. He's a B-level fighter at super middleweight. He's gotten his confidence back, but I don't think he's much better than what he used to be. Maybe slightly, but not much, by much. Eubank has improved a lot since the fight against Billy Joe Saunders. He's no longer that, that combination guy with no jab. He's got a jab, but it's just not as authoritative as it can be. So the question is, can Eubank beat a B-level fighter? I believe he can. I believe he's good enough to to accomplish this task. I think he will have some problems early on with Groves because of his style. It's a different style compared to what he's been fighting since this Billy Joe Saunders fight. However, the one thing that Junior needs to forget, he needs to forget about those sparring sessions. And I know that's what's giving him a lot of confidence in this fight, but he needs to forget about that. That's out the window. It's garbage. That was years ago. That was before Groves was champion, was probably coming off the loss to Froch, was psychologically damaged. He needs to forget about that. Groves, this is a different time now. Groves is confident, and he's going to be punching with good power, and he's going to be fast. He's going to be there, and he's going to be difficult. But he's there to be hit. He is vulnerable. He has gassed in certain fights. He is slowed down. His gas tank, I wouldn't say is as strong as Eubank's. So I can sense a controversial ending in this fight, and it's because of what Senior brought up in the build-up to the fight, that Junior's dangerous. He's a natural talent. That he's an animal. That he's a machine. That he won't stop, and he's going to continue punching for every second of every round, and that the referee has to protect George Groves. So hopefully this is not going to be a situation where something tragic happens to either of these guys, because none of these guys are concussive punchers, and they have the type of power that they can keep hitting a guy and the guy won't go to sleep. He won't get slept, but that can mean a lot of damage to that fighter. So hopefully that doesn't go down, because boxing doesn't need a Nigel Benn, Gerald McClellan type tragedy. But I can sense a controversial stoppage in this fight. It's going to be tricky for Junior in the beginning. Groves will lose focus, as usually does. He'll be pinned to the ropes. Junior will land some big punches. Junior's not a big puncher, but he has decent enough power to get your respect. He'll be able to land on Groves, land his uppercuts, his overhand rights when he's on the inside, as he pins Groves against the ropes. And in the later rounds, as Groves begins to tire, Junior's going to be outpointing him and landing some good punches and combinations. And I sense a controversial stoppage in this fight, as the referee will step in because of the constant combinations and punches being landed, but Groves is still going to be there, still going to be responsive, and the referee's going to jump in the later rounds. Between 8 and 10, Eubank will get the stoppage in controversial fashion. Eubank will, for this fight, it'll be controversial, but he'll be vindicated. He'll prove to some people that he's real, that he's not some hype job, that he's not some project. He'll become WBA super middleweight champion of the world. Most likely will pull out of the tournament and fight Caleb Truax. And for George Groves, I think he will shown that he's got his confidence back, that he's a worthy champion, but he's just good, but not great. Y'all let me know what y'all think. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.